Hey everyone, welcome back to JavaScript Deep Dive. I'm Madan Mohan, and in today's episode, we'll explore functions in JavaScript. It's one of the most fundamental building blocks of the language. To start with, what is a function? In simple terms, function is a block of code which is responsible to perform a specific task. So these functions would help us in order to reduce the redundancy in our code. Let's say I want to add two numbers. I may require to perform this addition multiple times. Rather writing this sum multiple times, what we can do is we can create one function, and whenever we require this sum functionality, we can call the specific function, so that instead of rewriting the logic every time we need it, we can simply use the same thing wherever we want it. Let me show you in action. So let's see how to create a function. In order to create a function, we use a keyword called function followed by name of the function, let's say sum, and then parenthesis and a block. So we can call this as a function definition. Now I simply log some function. Okay, let's save. If you observe, nothing is printed over here. The reason is we just declared a function. What we need to do is we need to call this function in order to execute the function. How to call this function? Sum. This is nothing but calling a function. Now see, let me remove the debuggers and refresh. See the output as some function. So this is a simple function. This is how we can create a function using a function keyword, and we call this as a declaration, and this is a calling of a function. Unless you call the function, this function will not be executed. We can even do it in another way. This type is a function expression. So we can even write the function this way as well. This is function declaration. This is a function expression. Let me call this. You can see add function is also got printed. So this is also another way which we call it as a function expression. So what is the difference between these two? When it comes to hosting, we'll see the difference. You already learned about the hosting in our previous video, right? So here what happens is whenever the program has been executed, this function would be considered as a function, and in the memory allocation phase, complete function would be available. Even if you try to call this function right over here before initialization, it simply works. All right, let's try to do this. Now see, cannot access add before initialization. So this is the difference. Just because you used a constant over here, add would be considered as a variable, and as you already know, while allocating memory, add will be assigned with a value undefined. So that's the reason you cannot access it before declaration. That's the difference between a normal function declaration and the expression. Now I can show you an interesting thing here. Let me declare a variable here, a equals to 10. Okay, now inside the function I'll declare a same variable and assign a different value. Okay, let me call this function, and instead of this, let me log the value a, and also I want to log a. Now what I want to show you is I declared a variable a out of the function, right? The first value is 10. Now inside the function we have another a which is 20, and there is a console log a over here, and outside the function also there is one more console log. Let me do it this way. Let's see what happens. The first A is printed with the value 20, and the second one is printed with the value 10. So reason for this is before the execution, as you know, first variable would be stored with undefined, and then the complete function would be stored, and then while executing this particular function, new execution context would be created for the function, right? So this is a global execution context where a equals to 10. So first a would be stored inside the global execution context, inside which there will be one more execution context especially for this specific function where a equals to 20. This variable a is specifically related to this function, so this where a will be inside the execution context of this function. That is the reason these two variables are different. So that's why you're seeing 20 and then console log a means this will be global variable a that will be printed 10. One more thing, let's say for example, I want to create one more function, multiply. Again, I want to add a here, this time 30. Let me call this function. You know, right? Unless you call the function will never be executed. Now what this console is going to be printed? Just because it is another function, it will be again a new execution context. So this a is also different. That's the reason you'll see equals to 30. You might come across such questions in your interview. That's the reason why our first episode is very important to solidify your learnings. Even in the interview, they might ask you different scenarios, but once you understand how the execution happens behind the scenes, how a variable behaves, how a function behaves, then it will be very easy for you to answer any such questions. Right, with this we are moving on to another way of creating a function, which is an arrow function, which we can even say a modern way of creating a function. Let me const function name and arrow. This is it. This is an arrow function. Let me call this and save. I can see this is another way of writing a function, which is a modern way. What if I try to log this function name here and just before the declaration, let's see what it's going to be printed. Save. You can see line number 1 is saying that cannot access function name before initialization, just because it simply treats this as a variable. That's the difference. When it comes to hosting, there you'll see the difference. If you try to use a function keyword and create a function, it will be treated as a normal function. If you use a function expression or if you use an arrow function, it simply treats as a variable in memory allocation phase. If you want to see this in action, see this function name is outside the global space. Let me create one more function, sum, and call this. Now the function name is outside the global space. Now let's look for the function sum. Say this. The sum would be considered as a function and it stores the complete function. That's the reason even before the declaration you can access the sum. But if you try to do it this way, or if you try to create a function using function expression, that would be stored in a separate space just like this. We can even pass parameters to the function as well. Let me show you. I want to pass parameter a to this and I wanna log this one. So as I'm passing the a here, we call this as a parameter and we are passing value from here. Whenever I'm calling the function, the value will be passed from here. Like you can see 10 is printed over here. So the a that we passed over here is a function parameter and the value that which we are passing while calling the function is called an argument. We can even pass multiple parameters as well. Let me now you can see as I passed 10 and 20 over here and I'm just trying to add those two, or we can even return value total. As soon as I save, you'll see nothing in the console just because I didn't log this. We just return the value. So that's the reason what we need to do is we need to store the return value in a variable. Let's say, let me log this. Now you can see the value 30. So if you observe this, earlier when we are writing the functions, the output of the function is not dependent on the input. So these type of functions, as we are passing the parameters and the arguments from here, so the outcome of the values would be depending on the input that we are passing. So if we change the values here, let's see, you can see the output. So this is how we can even pass parameters to the functions as well. And one more interesting thing here is what happens when I write a console over here. I want to, let's say for example, I want to console log this. If you observe, nothing is printed here in the console. After return statement, nothing is going to be printed. If you want, you can even see console.log after return before return. Let me save it. You can see before return is printed, and then we are returning the value of the function, and then it will be stored over here in the variable. As I log the value val, which is printed over here, which is 130, you can see line number 16. But after the return statement, whatever you write, nothing will be executed. Okay, you can even see unreachable code detected. So whenever you return a function, after that nothing will be executed. In the next episode, we'll dive deeper into the concept of scope and closures in JavaScript. Thanks for watching and happy coding.